Hi, I'm Ananya. I'm a junior content manager with Trip 101. Today, we're covering the Teardrop Nation, which is very close to me. I've invited a guest over here who's all the way across from the US. So we're sitting too far apart on the world and we're discussing a country that's so close to me. I'm very excited. Welcome to the session. I'm excited to talk to you about Sri Lanka today.
Thank you. I'm excited as well.
Before we deep dive into the trip that you had to Sri Lanka, please tell me a little about yourself. What do you do, where you're from, and yourself as a traveler?
So I'm born and raised in Houston, Texas, lived here my whole life, went to university here. For the past 5 years, I've been working as a management consultant. And so part of that time, I actually took a sabbatical. So I say 5 years, but it's a little bit closer to four and a half. And took that break to travel. So very much the person I am. Like I said, born and raised in Houston, but my family roots are from India. And for me, traveling is just something I love for the new experiences, the adventures, the food. And then I think most importantly, the people that I meet along the way, the connections I can make.
Yeah. So in the sabbatical that you took, were you mostly traveling?
Yes, for the entire 5.5 month period, I was entirely traveling, and Sri
Wow.
Lanka was one of my stops.
How many countries did you cover?
In 5.5 months, I did 10 countries. A couple of those countries I stayed in for anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. And then a couple other countries, I was only there for a week or less. So it just varied depending on the location, the time I had.
Yeah, that's so cool that you were able to take this break from work and then see the world, which you wouldn't have otherwise if you were at your desk.
Yes, definitely. Very grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah. So when was this trip to Sri Lanka that you did?
Sri Lanka was in March of 2024, March 3rd through 20th, about 2.5 weeks.
Oh, nice. And how much of the country were you able to see in that span?
In that span of time, I'd say half the country, maybe
Ah,
less than that actually, because I was mostly in the southern and western, like remembering my directions, the western part of the country,
hmm,
because Sri Lanka is one of those places where, depending on the time of year you go, certain areas are better in different seasons. So in March, better to be on the west, southern and west part, whereas if you're there in other times of year, the northern and eastern part are better for weather.
March was a good time to see the southern and the western part.
Yes. It was
Oh,
hot and humid by the coast, but
hmm.
I think overall still a good time to go. And I got lucky that rain wasn't an issue.
Okay. Before you went, you must have done a lot of research about Sri Lanka. Did it live up to your expectations or did it surprise you in any way?
Yes, Sri Lanka exceeded my expectations. I came in knowing I would enjoy it. I learned about Sri Lanka as a travel destination through social media. I think more and more budget travelers started to go. And I consider myself semi-budget. I stay in hostels and guest houses. I like a little bit of city and adventure mixed in. Sometimes I'll splurge here and there, so not totally budget. And Sri Lanka really exceeded those expectations from the sense of all the nature, the beautiful nature, the activities that you could do. There's surfing, scuba diving, hiking, and the people were really friendly. The food, I didn't know what to expect. It's largely vegetarian friendly or very vegetarian friendly, but there are non-veg options. It was a good mix. I had an amazing time with the people I met. The locals were friendly. I hung out with my dive master and his dive master friends, surrounded by 15 locals, just having a fun party on the beach. Those little moments I love. And then I also have a Sri Lankan friend in Houston. So I had heard a little bit about Sri Lanka from her and been given some travel tips. So that helped as well.
Oh, that's so cool. So you were in Sri Lanka as a solo female traveler?
Yes, I was a solo female traveler. Part of the time, I actually traveled with a friend who I had met in the first couple of days that I was in Sri Lanka. We just vibed and we said, okay, you want to start traveling together for a little bit? And yeah,
Hmm.
and that was that. But otherwise, I was mostly solo female traveler in Sri Lanka. Yeah.
Before you went, did you have any concerns about safety being a woman in Sri Lanka?
I wouldn't say too many concerns, but I did think you need to be aware. Honestly, anywhere I go, London, Paris, Western European cities, or going to Asian cities, Latin America, I'm always in the mindset of you need to be very aware. of where you are, who you interact
Yeah.
with as a solo female traveler. So Sri
Yeah.
Lanka was no different than anywhere else to me of, okay, just be smart, be aware of your surroundings, don't do anything stupid.
Yeah. I think that's an experience. I think that's something you build over the years as well. When you keep traveling, that you become quite aware of your surroundings and you act accordingly.
Yes, over
Yeah.
time.
So when you went in March, did you see a lot of tourists around, or were you mentioned like you were the only tourist with your dive master? So
Yes, I would say in a lot of places I went, the southern part of the island developed more in terms of tourism. I've heard the northern and eastern parts of Sri Lanka are less touristy, but again, because I wasn't there at the right time of year, I didn't go. There were a lot of tourists in some beach towns, but I still wanted to interact with locals as much as possible. I was lucky that when I was doing my open water scuba diving certification, my dive master invited me to the beach one night and said, "Hey, it's one of my friend's birthdays. One of the other dive masters is having a small birthday party on the beach tonight. You should come. We'll have some food and drinks." And that was, for me, that was such a special moment because I love being a fly on the wall, even though I'm a person there, but just being able to seeing them interact in a way that they normally would live their lives in that place. And I think one of them brought out one of their traditional drums and they started going into like different traditional Sri Lankan songs and dances. And so for me, that was really cool to see.
that must have been quite an experience trying to
Definitely.
teach all the traditional music and stuff.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So where all in the southern and the western part that you were in, which were the cities or the towns that you visited in the span that you were there, 2.5 weeks?
After I landed in Colombo, I immediately went to Hikkaduwa, a small beach town, a couple hours drive away from Colombo. Stayed there for one night. Then I went to Unawatuna, which is another beach town. And I was there for about 4 nights, I believe, mainly because I was doing my scuba certification. So that took up most of my time. Then I went to Hirikitia, another beach town, just continuing further on the coast. And there I was for about 3 nights. I skipped Mirisa, which is a popular beach town. A lot of the beach towns are beautiful and similar. If I could go back, it would be cool to see Mirisa, but Hirikitia was equally beautiful. So it was great. And then I went inland to Ella and Nuara Elia, where the tea plantations are. And then I stayed one night in Kandy, which is another city in Sri Lanka, just really a stopover until I went to Sigiriya, which is a little bit further inland. That's where you can see the elephants. There are also some ancient ruins and hiking. So that was awesome. Then returned to Colombo, Negombo for my last 1 or 2 nights before I flew out.
So from all these cities or towns that you were in, the smaller towns as well, which one would you say was the best one for you, or this one that's really stood out for you as an experience to visit?
I would say Hirikitia. I really liked Hirikitia. The beach itself is beautiful. The best place for beginner surfing. So I would just go out there into the water, practice my surfing, which wasn't the best at a beginner. There was a lot of good food from what I remember as well, like restaurants lined by the beach. In general, the atmosphere was really nice. The only thing about Hirikitia is that it is very touristy. So it felt like a place that would have been harder to interact with locals. But for me, I enjoy all of the above, interacting with locals, seeing local experiences, but also meeting other travelers. So even if it was touristy, I didn't mind it too much as long as everyone's respectful, everyone's nice.
So it was the people that made Hirikitya special.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And some of the food is really good.
Okay. And among the others, like for the other towns you were in, what was special about them?
For me, blue water, beautiful ocean views, that is just something that makes me happy. And so all of them would have pretty clean beaches, and the water was very blue, and it just felt like you could just sit and chill, which was nice. But then also because there are activities like surfing and scuba diving, and I've become more interested in water activities. That's what I really liked about each of the places that I went to. And then, of
So,
course, some of the people I met were just so
yeah.
lovely.
There were two activities you were doing, scuba and surfing. Both of these you're a little bit new at and still learning.
Yes, yes, definitely.
And how was it in Sri Lanka to experience this and learn at the same time? Were you able to see a lot of like marine life while you were doing scuba?
Able to see some marine life. I think it sometimes the visibility wasn't as clear as we wanted it, but we did see marine life. That was cool. And it was one of my first experiences scuba diving, so I didn't know what to expect. Yeah.
That's so exciting. You began your scuba journey in Sri Lanka.
Yes, not really a typical place that people would begin, but
Yeah.
I think it was a good place for me to learn. I had a good instructor and a good dive school that I chose.
What about surfing? Have you done that before, or were you also trying that for the first time in Sri Lanka?
I had surfed before, but only once in Costa Rica, a couple times in Portugal, once or twice in Brazil. So it had been very sporadic over the years. And then in Sri Lanka, I did surfing for a few times. And later in the Philippines, I surfed for about almost a full month. I was in one town and would surf multiple times in the week.
Oh, nice. Did
Yeah.
you find other surfers in Sri Lanka?
In Hidakidea, there were a lot of other people surfing, one of the best known places for beginner surfing. So,
Oh, wow. Okay. Now I know where to go if I want to start surfing.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So, those beach towns in general, great for if you love being at the beach, chilling at the beach, being in the ocean, water activities, great for
Mm,
that. I
mm.
really love Nuada Elia. It's a nice break from the heat. It was hot by the coast. I can handle heat. I'm okay with it. But going inland was nicer for that. And then
Pleasant.
places like Sigiri, Ella, it was just so green. Like you'd be maybe on the road driving up a mountain or hill, and you just look around and it's very green, very beautiful. Good, like small hiking opportunities here and there. And so that was something that I loved. And then, of course, the wildlife. I didn't go to many national parks, but there was one elephant reserve we went to. It was really cool to see the elephants up close.
Oh, wow. So in the inland towns, a lot of them are, they have these historical attractions as well, right? They are the ones which have the colonial connections and older monuments that the country has.
Yes. And then near Sigiriya, there are some ancient ruins. And so you're learning about history from thousands of years ago, which is very cool to see. There's
Mhm.
also a town called Anuradhapura further north that I didn't get to go to, but that's also very good to for ancient
Mhm.
ruins in Sri Lanka.
Which one of the inland towns did you like being in, or where did you enjoy the most?
Between Sigiriya and Ella was good for the little town that you're in is pretty small, but it was interesting because I was walking on the town and like these buildings look like almost like a ski lodge, but it's not. It's we're not in a ski lodge town, but some of the wooden structures of the restaurants and different businesses look like that, which is interesting. But I think in Ella, I liked climbing Little Adams Peak. That was a small hike that you can do for sunrise. So seeing that at sunrise was beautiful. There's a Nine Arches Bridge where you can walk on the railway and wait for the train to come by, though I never saw the train go by, but I have pictures of me on the bridge, which is cool. And
Mhm.
then I also did a cooking class in Ella, which
Oh,
was really fun. You're cooking all these different curries. You can hear the sizzle and smell all these spices. So I really enjoyed that. Actually, I think I answered my question. I think Ella is probably my favorite one. Sigiriya was also up there for me. I really had a good time there.
okay. So what did you learn at the cooking class?
Oh, we learned different types of curries. Sri Lankan food is very coconut based. We would give us the coconut sliced in half, and we'd use one of these graters to get the shred the coconut out
Mhm.
of the half open coconut. We made a coconut roti, pumpkin curry, eggplant curry, okra curry, so many different types of curries, coconut rice. And then I think there was another coconut something I'm forgetting, but there were so many options. But those are really the main types of curries that we made, and some dal, of course.
Did you enjoy having this much coconut-based cuisine when cooking?
I did, yes. I think that's one thing to know about Sri Lankan food. I love coconut-based food. I love the taste of coconut. If somebody isn't a huge coconut fan or if you have an allergy, then that is something to be aware of the cuisine.
Yeah. I think it takes a little while to get used to that flavor. I come from North India, so initially I was really reluctant to try it, but now
Yeah.
that I've had a bit of it, I like it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You start getting used to it.
yeah, when you get used to it, it tastes better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what were the, apart from the cooking class that you did, what was the other food that you liked over there? Did you go to some restaurants or cafes that you enjoyed, or any dish that you remember that was really great?
Yes. So I would say yeah, in general, I would have a lot of Sri Lankan food, street food that you find off the side of the road. I like the full range when I travel, semi-budget travel. I go from the street food to the fancy restaurants. And so there was one restaurant I remember because people had told me, okay, when you're in Hirakitia, go to this restaurant. It's going to be expensive, but it is worth it if you're willing to splurge. And it's called Smoke and Bitters. And it was really good, very good. I don't think any of the dishes I had were Sri Lankan food, but it was like fancy dining food. I remember for dessert, I think the dessert we had panna cotta. That was really good. In general, everything was delicious there. That's one of my memorable meals. I randomly remember having really good pizza in Hirakitia as well, which I would not have expected. Those are the non-Sri Lankan, like Western foods I remember. And then in terms of Sri Lankan food, the cooking class I did called Mate Hut. That was the name of the cooking class that I did in Ella. And I remember that meal was delicious, very
Yeah.
good. And then I can think of a number of other meals, but I think the list would go on and on.
Did you try seafood also anywhere?
Yes, actually, the second night in Sri Lanka, I think I have a picture of this. Just off the side of the road, we saw a stand where they had these fresh fish, and you could just choose, and they'd make it immediately.
Oh, wow.
So it's just this fish on the grill. It was so fresh, flaky, and juicy. That was a very good seafood that I had, and very early on my trip when I knew, okay, it's gonna be good.
So you had good experiences all across, like you were saying, you like across the budget. So from the stalls on the street to like the fine dining restaurant that
Yes,
was recommended to you. You had
yes.
good experiences all across.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. But
Yeah.
how were you moving around within Sri Lanka from one city to the other? Were you taking taxis or did you book trains anywhere?
Yes, I would say I did a combination of rideshare apps, taxis, mini buses, and trains. So when I first landed, I used Uber and then I used Pick Me at some point. Pick Me is one of their rideshare apps. So before going to Sri Lanka, I download it to compare. When I was traveling with the friend that I met, we used Pick Me at times, but then we also booked transportation through one of these, I think somewhere online where you can get a mini van and they'll pick up multiple people who are going from Hirikitia to Ella. And so we did that at some point. We did another minivan pickup from Ella to Nuara Elia. From Nuara Elia to Kandy, I took the train. And I would highly recommend if you can take the train from Ella to Nuara Elia and then to Kandy, I think that would be the best because you can get the full scenery of the tea fields. It's just so green and beautiful. So iconic, beautiful, scenic train ride. That would be
Cross,
one of my
would you
options.
cross the Nine Arches Bridge on this route?
I don't think so. When I was
Okay.
in Ella, we didn't take the train, so I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure that where Nine Arches Bridge is, I think it's more so you want to take pictures of the bridge than be on the
Hmm.
train. Yeah,
And you never saw the train, so you're not sure if it ever comes.
exactly. I took the train from Nuara Elia to Kandy, so that's the part that I can speak to. And then
Yeah.
I actually took public buses where it's
Huh?
just pretty much all locals except for a couple tourists like me and anyone else who's willing to take local transportation. That's something I always like to do. Just take local transportation, travel the way locals travel from one city to another. That was an experience because you have to be adaptable with train and bus schedules in Sri Lanka
Yeah.
because there are delays. I remember getting on one bus at some point thinking, I don't actually know if this is the right bus going to the place I'm supposed to go to. But the driver was nice. The guy collecting the tickets was very nice and helped me out with my luggage and making sure I got to where I needed to go.
That's great. Did you have
Definitely.
to pre-book the train ride, or was it possible to just go there and get the tickets?
Yes, you need to pre-book if you know the train you want to take. Go ahead and book it in advance because they do get booked out a little bit while in advance. That's the reason I didn't take the train from Ella to Nuara Elia because the date we wanted it was sold out.
Okay. But that you got it from in that second run from Noradia to Candy.
Yes, yes, very glad for that. We booked a week or at least a few days in advance, so don't wait last minute.
I want to now ask you about where you were staying in the various towns and cities that you visited. How did you pick your accommodations in these various locations?
Yeah, so I honestly just went by ratings on Hostelworld or Booking.com. Sri Lanka was very much last minute planning. I didn't know what hostel I was staying in. I would stay in the first night in Sri Lanka until the day before. I was boarding my plane. I was in Dubai before I was in Sri Lanka. And I remember boarding my plane in Dubai, booking the first hostel that I saw for Hikadua because I knew that I would land in Colombo on early in the morning and
Hmm.
I knew that I could get a ride down, use Uber or something to get down to Hikadua. But I thought, okay, I need to figure out where to stay. And then there was this hostel, Habibi Hostel, or sorry, Hummus Hostel and restaurant that had very high ratings. And it was also one of the few that was still available. So I said, okay, this is the hostel I'm booking. And I got lucky because I met a friend who I started traveling with. Some of the hostel workers were super nice and chill to hang out with and talk to. So it was very last minute booking. And then from there, each place after that was okay, let's check what is available, what has decent ratings, and go from there.
So you were planning your accoms like on the go once you were about
A
to
little
reach
bit.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say so. Say by the time I arrived in Sri Lanka, I didn't have any accommodations booked. I only
Okay.
had that first night booked. And then when I got to Hummus Hostel in Hikadua, the owner of the hostel said, oh, where are you going after Hikadua? And I said, Una Watuna. I said, okay, book at Habibi Hostel. I know the owner. He'll give you a discount. Like, that was so nice of him. And sometimes spontaneous plans can
Hmm.
be better. 'Cause if I had something booked, I wouldn't have had room to change those plans, meet the amazing people I met at Habibi Hostel. So it works out.
And it's really nice that the locals and the hostel owner was able to help you out. That can only
Yeah.
happen when you're in that moment and you're interacting with the people around you, and that helps you figure out where you're going next.
Yeah, definitely.
How are both of these hostels, Hummus and Habibi, the first two that you stayed at?
They were great, typical hostel accommodations. I think I was in a bunk room the first night and then in my own private room. Sometimes you don't have air conditioning. So I had air conditioning, I think, at Hummus Hostel. I don't remember if I had it at Habibi Hostel, but you can always choose. So just remember that when you're booking hostels ever in any of these places. But for me, it was like the people that I met. Also, the food. The food at the hostels were very good because they were hostels and restaurants. I remember
Oh,
having this passion fruit juice at a Habibi hostel that I really liked. It was so refreshing coming back after a day of scuba diving, coming back to the hostel, having that juice in hand to relax and cool down. The next day was Hirikatia. I stayed at a place called Hidden Heaven. After Hummus Hostel and Habibi Hostel, I didn't stay in hostels for a while. I stayed in what's called guest houses, which if you go to booking.com or any other booking platform, you can find these guest houses, which are basically some locals have a property or a bunch of properties with rooms, like an Airbnb situation.
yeah.
And so Hidden Heaven was the place I stayed at in Hirikatia. Air conditioning was very strong. I'm a little bit cold in this room. I have to turn up the temperature. Comfortable stay, not too far. It was walkable to the main restaurant and beach area, but you could also take a pick me or a tuk-tuk. Tuk-tuk was another big form of transportation. Yeah.
So the hidden gem was a gem.
Yeah, Hidden Heaven. Hidden Heaven was
Heaven.
a
Okay.
was a good spot. Yeah.
And then what was the next
And
one?
that was in Ella Superview Homestay, Hidakitya. This was what I guess you could call a homestay in the sense that they have rooms that you can rent out and an Airbnb situation. And that was like super view is very much an accurate description. You have the room, you have a little porch area, and then you have the mountains and the hills that you're looking at that you can wake up to. And that was beautiful. The people in charge of the accommodations, they were so sweet. We had breakfast included in that stay. And so that was like, it was delicious. I wish I could remember what we had, but it was really good. And I remember is that while we were there, my friend and I decided to do the sunrise hike at Little Adams Peak one morning. And the owners made us breakfast that early in the morning so that we could have it at 5:30 a.m. before we
Wow.
could and so we could take it and have breakfast when we got to the sunrise spot. So that was super nice of them. And the view was beautiful. Room was clean and nice. Yeah. All in all, 10 out of 10 on that location. Yeah. And so that was that one. After Ella was Nuada Elia. We stayed in a place called Chevy House, I believe. And it was another one of these guest houses, homestays that we found on booking.com. The homestay owners made breakfast for us and took us to the tea fields where you can do a little bit of a tour and buy some teas. Yeah, the owners really helped us out in Nuada Elia to understand what is in the area and what all we can do. That was pretty cool as well.
I think Sri Lankan hospitality is something that I'm definitely
Yes,
recognizing.
there is
It's
that
top
Sri Lankan
notch.
hospitality for sure. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was yeah. And I don't I think that goes across the country. Obviously, these people I'm meeting are in the tourism industry. I would expect more hospitality than the average person, but overall, people were very nice.
Cooking a meal does indicate they were going out of their way.
That was very sweet of them for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then after Nuara Elia, I was in Kandy at this White Rose hostel. It was your basic hostel. I arrived in Kandy, had dinner, went to the hostel, slept, and the next morning I left. I can't speak for much of the hostel besides I slept in it and it was fine. It was comfortable, good budget location to stay in. The hostel I want to talk about is Roy's Villa in Sigiriya. This was beautiful. It was remote from the main area of Sigiriya, but I remember they have this like second floor area where you have some bean bags and hammocks where you can just lounge in. And I remember seeing this field across from the hostel where you would see the peacocks walking around and hear them. That was very nice. And this hostel, Roy's Villa, I feel like it was like summer camp for adults. Like they would have an itinerary that of activities that you could participate in if you wanted to or not. They would say, okay, as a group, we're going to go for the sunrise hike by Lions Rock or that other rock. Or they would say, we're going to have cooking class for the whole group. We're going to do this. And you could join in whatever you wanted. That one is my favorite hostel because of how curated the itinerary was. It was like I didn't have to think anymore. I had
Yeah.
them making plans for me and I chose which ones I wanted to participate in.
Yeah. As a I think that can be really helpful, like someone else doing the planning for you because it can get intimidating sometimes.
Absolutely. There's the paradox of choice and having all of these decisions that you can make. Oh, do I do this today? Do I do that? Do I eat this? Do I eat that? And of course, I love having that choice in my day to day. But at Roy's Villa, I was appreciative. They already had activities lined out.
Did they also have meals at Royce Villa?
Yes, they actually did one of the most important things was family dinner. They had a little kitchen in the back, their own mini restaurant, and we would have family dinner every night at the hostel. They had a set menu and they'd have the placemats lined up in on the table and everyone would sit together at a certain time and be served dinner. It was very cute. I love that part about it. Uh,
Yeah, that's such a nice way to meet other travelers and just get to know
Definitely.
everyone a little bit.
That was one of the easiest ways. Very social hostel. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I liked, there's a difference between social and party hostels. This was a social hostel. They had activities, family dinners, made it easy to meet other travelers. But honestly, all our activities were done by 9:30, 10 p.m. And people were going to bed around 10:30. If you wanted to stay up later, you could, but it's a little remote. I don't know what you'll be doing. And it was great. I was at a point where I'm like, if I have to wake up for sunrise hikes and early morning activities, then I would rather be in bed early.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And Sigiriya is the
Yeah.
spot where you want to reach early to catch those views.
Yes, exactly.
So Roy's Villa was a 10 on 10.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, 10 out of 10. And then the last place I went to was Tuk Tuk Hostel in Negombo, and that was more so just a place to stay before I flew out of Sri Lanka. So that one, I can't comment much on it. It was basic accommodation. I think it was one of those 4x2. So it was a good amount of space in the room itself for four people in the room that I was in.
I think all of your stays were pretty good, even though you booked at the last minute and you were going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's quite great that you were able to have such great experiences as well. I'm sure recommendations coming from the locals were good.
Definitely. That was a big part of it too.
So Priya, what would be your tips for people traveling to Sri Lanka? What would be your top three or top five tips that you would like to give to someone planning a visit to Sri Lanka?
Sure. I would say the big one I can think of is carry cash. It is a very cash heavy country. There are many times where you have a very big bill and it's cash only. So
Mm.
carry cash, go to people's bank ATM. That was the only ATM I found that didn't have extra fees. So if you want fewer fees, people's bank ATM was the one to go to.
There are no digital transactions at all, or only very few places.
There were some places where I was able to use my credit card. Sometimes they would have a fee. So that I think maybe an extra 3% fee. Overall, it was very cash heavy. So that's a big one. I think I already mentioned transportation options to download Pick Me, be flexible and adaptable with train and bus schedules because there can be delays, and then book your train in advance since they get sold out pretty far in advance, as in at least a week out, I would say. For your visa, there is a visa for obviously depends on where you're coming from. But I can speak for US passport holders. There is a visa you can apply for online 24 hours in advance, or apparently you can get visa on arrival. I prefer to do things in advance. So I applied for my visa, I think it was 40 US dollars a few days in advance. Yes. And then I guess two more tips I would say are to be aware of how you dress. At beach towns, you can wear a swimsuit at the beach, but you should have a cover up in town to be respectful. So just don't forget to bring that. And then I think I mentioned the last one earlier, but the food is often very coconut based, very vegetarian friendly, which I love to see, even though I'm not vegetarian, but I just appreciated seeing that. So if you have allergies, take that into consideration.
Did you struggle with the language at any point, or was English spoken everywhere, more or less?
English was spoken pretty widely. Most tour guides spoke English fairly well. But I know when I was in one of the hostels, I think at Roy's Villa in Sigiriya, sometimes some of the people who are working at the hostel may not fully know English, but the majority of people I met, especially people who are in the tourism industry, hospitality in some way, I'd say most people I encountered knew English.
That's good. So
Yeah.
language was not a challenge.
Not too much, no. Yeah. It's still helpful to learn some words like hello and thank you in the local language. But otherwise, yeah, people were able to communicate in English with me.
Those were all really great tips that you had. I'm sure they'll be helpful for people who are planning to visit. I'm down to my last couple of questions with you. I want to know, like, what was it about Sri Lanka that made it special for you? Like, how will you remember it when you think about it later on as the place that you visited?
So I think though, if I had to think of one thing, I think it's the nature, the natural beauty of the country. Because I think I came in not really knowing much about the country and seeing pictures here and there, but actually being there in person and seeing how green it is around you, seeing the beautiful blue ocean. It's a lot of areas. I didn't spend that much time in the city, so maybe that's why I didn't spend that much time in Colombo or Kandy. But I think for me, it was just seeing how green it was and just fully feeling like I was out in nature. That was something that I really.
Nice. And my last question is, did you pick up any souvenirs from Sri Lanka?
Yes, I did. When I was in the tea area, I bought some of the big boxes of different types of teas that you can get. So
Mm.
that was a big thing. That was in Nuara Elia. Good place to get souvenirs. I think I also got a magnet here or there, but that's just something I like to do as well. And then for my brother, I actually got the Sri Lanka cricket team shirt, which
Oh,
has the lion on it. And I just thought it was beautiful. I thought it looked really cool. And my brother likes sports. So I said, okay, cool, let me get that. I think those are the main souvenirs, like mainly from the tea area inland, and then some magnets and that shirt.
yeah,
Yeah.
Ceylon tea is quite famous. The Sri Lankan tea, I think, is really special and it's considered like one of the best in the world. So that's a good
Yeah.
souvenir to pick for sure. I didn't
Yes.
ask earlier, but did you try any of the teas while you were visiting? No idea.
Oh, yeah. We had an area where we were able to sample teas. There was a black tea, green tea, white tea, so many different types of tea within those categories you can try. Yeah. So with the brief tour we had, we also had a tea tasting.
Did you have a favorite from the sampling that you did?
I would say, I mean, I like all the teas. The white tea, I a lot. I think that's mainly because I don't encounter white tea as much as green tea and black tea. There was something more, I think that one was a little bit more floral, or there was some other floral tea within the white teas that I
Thanks so
like.
much for sharing about your experience, Priya. It has been really great listening to you, and I'm sure that all the details that you have shared today about your trip will be really helpful for anyone who's planning to visit Sri Lanka. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I love going down memory lane. So this was a great opportunity for me to remind myself how much I loved Sri Lanka and, of course, help anyone else who is thinking about taking a trip there.
So with that, we'll sign off for today. Thank you so much, and bye bye.
Thanks, Ananya. Bye.